how did Ottomans come to power, right? Ottomans, they of course were of Turkic origin, as I mentioned. They had different groups that they were divided in, but one thing that held them together was their origin and certain common traits that they shared. Like, for example, Seljuk, Ottomans before they were Seljuk, and then Ottomans took over Seljuk, and they became the most powerful one afterwards. But their place of origin is not, of course, the Muslim world. They resided in what is called now Central Asia. Right? But they moved and fled to the borders and to the Muslim world, and in the areas closer to the Byzantine Empire, where they would live in the Muslim world, but next to the borders of Byzantine Empire. The reason they moved had many reasons, but one of the primary reasons was this great threat that started to sweep through the world in general, and especially the Muslim world, because when we say the world at the time, it would generally come to either mind the Muslim world or the Byzantine, because they were the two powers dominating the world, especially the Muslim world. So this new great threat was the Mongols, because they had really terrorized the world because of their might, because of their expansion, and because of their brutality that would bring about. And this is something that is clearly manifest in the history. If you read, among the things that they would do, they would even drink the blood of their prisoners that they would capture and then kill. And there are incidents of even cannibalism in that regard. So it is very horrific to even imagine that. So because they were coming with force, Genghis Khan, who was of course one of the founders, one of the key figures in this, so they faced towards the east and towards the west, coming to the Muslim world, of course, and then that led many of the Turkish tribes to move this part of the world. And they slowly and surely started to settle in the Muslim land. Among them was this one group, and they would be known as, Beylik, I think that's the word that they have. So they would form small groups, because the tribes, Turkic tribes, they were they originally nomadic tribes, because they did not settle in one place, and therefore it was to their advantage to be able to accustom themselves to any city, to any civilization, to any place, to any climate that they move in, because this is something they had been living as such. And therefore, when they moved, they were able to settle down easily. So as the condition of the Muslim world was this bad, and on the other hand the Mongol invasion was taking over land after land and posing great threat, so Sunnatullah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that there is to be another power to rise and to shine and to be able to stabilize. And so it was the Ottoman Empire that finally and eventually became a superpower of the time. So when they moved, so among the different tribes, there was one tribe that belonged to this particular group that Osman Ghazi became the founder of. So Anatolia was the region in Turkey, Anatolia, that whole region where they had settled in, but it was the borderline of Byzantine Empire. But so they were able to live and slowly but surely start to conquer region. So Osman Ghazi, who was one of the very pious, and in fact the founder of this empire. Because of him, this whole Khilafah has been called as Khilafat al-Usmaniyya, the Ottoman Empire. And the way they progress is, it seems that there are odd reasons. In one hand, the Muslim conditions; on the other hand, internal issues that Byzantine itself was facing, especially in Balkan regions, the Eastern Europe, Macedonia, Bosnia, that region. So both of these situations gave them the serve in their interest to be able to conquer one after the other different regions and solidify and strengthen it. And in a short period of time, of course, Ertugrul Ghazi was the father of Osman Ghazi, and then of course Osman Ghazi became the prominent known leader because he was the one. They had small areas that they would conquer and they would settle and live. But Osman Ghazi was the first one to be able to stabilize their community, and of all the different Turkish tribes, he was able to be the unifier for them and expand the territory more than anybody else of their origin. And then he was able to also create a state for themselves. And the first capital of Ottoman Empire was actually Bursa, that he was able to capture from the Ottomans, from the Byzantine, and also establish it there as the Khilafah, as the capital of their Khilafah. Eventually it became one of the very known cities afterwards. So this is how they extended and expanded. And the nasiha that he gave, of course, Osman Ghazi, they had the term in Turkish, it's called bey, and this is the term that they use to refer to their military leader, who is the leader of their community, and would fight against the invasion and those who would attack them or would take them into war. So Osman was appointed as the leader of their tribe, and therefore he was able to successively take a number of launch campaigns and take over many different areas. So the first traditional state that they were able to establish as in the name of Ottoman, it was in 1299. It was about towards the end of the 13th century. And 13th century, as it came to an end, 14th and 15th centuries, these two centuries were the centuries where they were really able to expand far and beyond. If you look at the map, there are some maps out there on the internet, how they were able to quickly not only take over different parts of the Muslim world, but also Byzantine Empire, but also beyond that, many parts of Europe, especially the Eastern Europe. It was the time that Muslims in Spain had almost diminished. Either they were expelled from Spain or converted to Christianity. And so Islam, in one hand, almost was removed from the shores of Europe, from the European land. But on the other hand, around the same time, within a very short gap in between, they were able to advance and march in European territory from the eastern side. And it is to this interesting historic connection, Allama Iqbal coined these two couplets by saying, Jahan mein ahle iman basurat khurshid jeete hain, idhar dube udhar nikle. So he was referring to this situation of Muslims, that in one hand we see the sad demise of Islam and Muslims in Europe, but it was simply to come back again with the force by the Ottomans, all the way up until Vienna, Austria, Hungary. To this date, in Hungary there is a place where this very decisive battle was fought, and that battle was, the battle that became a catalyst in the history of Muslims in Europe. But they lost because of a number of reasons, the weather and other things. They could not go beyond. So there is literally a pole that they have erected in that regard. Many people love croissant, right? Croissant it's a French word. It refers to crescent. So the history of croissant goes back to actually a Venetian baker from Austria. So do you know that the first time, as the historians say, that the croissant was made by this Danish baker in order to celebrate the defeat of Ottomans. So, and they made it, and of course, and they celebrated it, because why? Crescent is the sign of Islam and Muslims, so you are devouring it, right? You are devouring that. So people don't know, and so each time I see it, this is why it's not haram, but I don't like to eat it because it reflects the history, and it takes you back to the history where once upon a time it was very precisely prepared and eaten just to mark the dawn of Islam in the European territory, the end of the dawn of Islam. So anyway, so this 15th and 16th century were the best centuries for Ottomans, but their establishment was in 1299. So the father, he gave a nasiha that I wanted to share with you to his son. Father, who am I referring to here? Usman. Usman Ghazi, of course, he was the one who was able to establish as a state for the first time for this Turkish tribe. And his father, of course, Ertuğrul, was not able to do, but he was really a very powerful and strong warrior. But his son, both of them, of course, today lay rest in Turkey, modern day Turkey, right? And I'm not sure if you have traveled, and you can go and visit their qubur, and they have preserved that. So his son Orhan Ghazi, so when he was, they both, of course, became very popular in Ottoman history. But when he was passing away, after many successful invasions, and they took this concept, of jihad fi sabilillah very seriously. So therefore, they would use this word Ghazi after their name. This Ghazi refers to actually Mujahid fi sabilillah. So they felt it is a religious duty of these leaders to, to engage in armed conflict with those whom the Muslim ancestors had fought against. For example, Khulafa al-Rashidun, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and Umar radiallahu anhu, and the rest, and then Umayyad dynasty and the Abbasid dynasty. So who is it that they were referring to? It was the Byzantine and Roman Empire, because Sahaba Rizwanullahi alayhim ajma'in also themselves fought against. So they felt that this was the religious duty for them to go in, in the battle against them, because of the type of issues that they had brought to the Muslims and Islam both. But one of the things that also they did, as they attacked them, to maintain the same spirit of tolerance towards the Christian community. So when any of the area from the Byzantine is to be conquered, when they would conquer any area, so they would leave that area and the community, on their own. They had the system that is called millet system. Millet system is the terminology that they coined, and it refers to the religious and administrative autonomy that was given to all of these different denominations and communities. So they would not interfere in their religious affairs, in their administrative. They would have their own leader, the religious, whoever it would be, to run their affairs as they like, without imposing upon them any of their own laws. So this was a very successful mechanism for them to be able to, because Ottoman Empire was a very unique and interesting in this regard, because they had different demographics and people of different ethnicity and religion, from Christians to Jews to, of course, Muslims, to also different ethnicities, and also Zoroastrians and Persians, all of that. So it is not easy to be able to maintain your power and maintain your authority over this vast kingdom and vast empire, but at the same time, those who are your subjects, they live relatively with freedom and happiness. So this shows, subhanAllah, their brilliant approach in this regard. This is why they were this nizam, the system was called as millat system, and this is something that they did in following the footsteps of course, Sahaba rizwanullahi alayhim ajma'in. The Ahlul Kitab, they have their freedom, they have their religion that Islam itself honors in certain ways for them to follow. So this is why they did what they did. So Usman Ghazi, when he passed away, so he gave the nasiha to his son, and the nasiha was this, his son was Ul-Haqq Ghazi. The masjid today, that many of their successors, the way they used to they used to nominate and celebrate the crown ceremony was very religious and very symbolic. If you have visited the Masjid Abu Ayyub al-Ansari radiyallahu anhu, the Sahabi whose qabr is in Turkey today. So adjacent to that masjid, to the tomb, is the masjid named after the Sahabi radiyallahu anhu. So it was this masjid, not in the beginning days, of course, later on, of course, which we inshallah discuss hopefully tomorrow. So the ceremony would take place in that masjid. Whoever would be the next Khalifa, he would be in that masjid, they would pray, and he would be turbanized. He would be turbanized. It was such a simple and humble celebration and ceremony, marking the religious role of the leader and the trajectory that he needs to take. So he would start his journey of assuming power from the masjid. That was very remarkable. And it is next to none, if you really see in all of the Islamic history, these types of things. They would not have these types of celebrations, such a humble, such a notable and noble. So, but that happened quite a few centuries, decades down the road, but this was the humble beginning that they had anyway. So he advised his son by saying, be careful about the religious issues before all other duties. When it comes to the religious matters, he advised him to be extra cautious and extra respectful and sensitive, because he said, it is these matters, the religious precepts build a strong state, he said. The religious precepts build a strong state. So I want you to be cognizant and respectful to this. So in a nutshell, what he was saying, always be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His ahkam. And if you do so, then you will see what? You will see the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala along the way. This is why it is miraculous that in such a short period of time, they were able to conquer such a vast geographic region. And in fact, Usman Ghazi, he had, of course, a dream. In that dream, he saw that there is a tree, subhanAllah, stemming from his, chest, and as it grows, the branches of it expand, and they expand to far and wide. They expand to far and wide, covering the whole horizon. As he was sleeping, he saw this dream, and the dream was that there is this tree, a sapling, that suddenly erupts from his chest and grows into a very magnificent tree, and the tree has branches reaching to far and wide. So this dream was very interesting. So he asked his sheikh, because they were also, mashallah, very religious, and he consulted with the scholar and asked him about the interpretation of the dream. And he said, this indicates that then you will be able to found an empire that would be very powerful, reaching far east and far west. So that was the interpretation of the dream given. And of course, lo and behold, the small beylik that was established in one small area, not this whole city, in a small area, by the nomadic tribe, and the leader of that was Usman. But in the subsequent decades and centuries, it became the superpower of the time. SubhanAllah. So it goes back to this, the religious commitment, the religious spirit, and also the unwavering commitment to the goals that they had set for themselves, and the warrior nature that the community had. So subhanAllah, these are the things that they did, and as a result they were able to expand and go beyond. But so they became, in a short period of time, a serious threat to, of course, Byzantine Empire, challenging Constantinople itself. So it was here their true charismatic power showcased, subhanAllah, their talents. This area was, of course, the area for Muslims and previous Muslim leaders, a dreamland to conquer. A dreamland to conquer. Because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, there is going to be a group from my ummah that will travel by sea and will conquer the city Constantinia. Ni'mal amiru amiruha, ni'mal jayshu jayshuha. Prophet ﷺ made dua for that army and for that leader. And Rasulullah ﷺ said, whoever would do that leader would be the best of the leaders, and that army who would partake in this will be the best of the armies. So Muslims had been attempting from, subhanAllah, the time of Sahaba Rizwanullahi alayhim ajma'in, during the time of Usman radiallahu anhu, in fact, Muawiyah radiallahu anhu as well. And one thing, very, very few things that you could use as an evidence, as a credit to Yazid, the son of Muawiyah, is actually this. This is why there is this debate among ulama. Because Rasulullah in the hadith predicted the bashara, gave the bashara to that army and also the leader. And Yazid was, of course, part of that army. He was part of that army during the time of course, Sahaba radhiyallahu anhum ajma'in. So being part of that army, especially when Abu Ayyub al-Ansari radhiyallahu anhu, when he joined them to conquer this area, he was, of course, not able to have this dream fulfilled in his lifetime, therefore he died. But Yazid was with him, and he was actually leading the army. So Muslims from that time had been attempting and aiming to conquer this region, but multiple attempts. But in one of the attempts during the time of Usman radiallahu anhu, they were able to succeed, was actually to conquer this Jazira island, what is known today as Cyprus, Cyprus. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, once he was sleeping, and he woke up and he had this dream, and there was a smile on his face. So the Sahabi Hiram bint Milhan radiyallahu ta'ala anha, he was in her house. So she noticed the pleasant gesture. So she asked Prophet ﷺ, what was this all about? So Rasulullah ﷺ, I was shown a dream in my dream that I see a group of my ummah traveling by sea to attack and then take over, and then he gave the bashara of Jannah for those who would be part of it. So she requested Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, make dua that I become part of that group. She asked Prophet ﷺ to make dua, and Rasulullah said, you will be part of that group. So when, during the time of Usman radiallahu anhu, this fleet was prepared, perhaps the first or one of the earliest naval fleet by Muslims. So she joined them. So she joined. And they traveled, of course, by sea for the first time, and they landed in on this island, Cyprus, and they were able to defeat, and they were able to take over after a certain time. And on the way, after the victory, they were, of course, returning, or the group that had conquered. This Sahabi radiallahu anha, she, subhanAllah, tripped from the horse, and then she fell. And as she fell, she became injured and died. She became injured and died. And so she died being in this foreign land. And today, if you go to Cyprus is divided into two parts. There is this Turkish part, and there is this Greek part. So subhanAllah, her qabr to this date is the site of visit. It is not Ottoman site. It is on the Greek site. And her qabr is there. There is a masjid adjacent to it. So she became the first woman in the history of Islam in this regard to have died in this part of the world. Look at the zeal of the even Sahabiyat and the women of early Islam, how they wanted to achieve Jannah, and regardless of the challenges that they would face. So this was conquered, but not Constantinople. So there was attempt from that time back and forth many times in between, and many khulafa tried to conquer this, unpenetrable city, unpenetrated city that was very strong. And this continued all the way until the time of Ottomans. And of course, the gap in between the first attempt, then this one is about 700 years, 700 to 800 years. So today when you visit Hagia Sophia Mosque, which used to be a cathedral, a very ancient building. So they, subhanAllah, when it was conquered, we will look at it inshallah tomorrow hopefully. So but there is this hadith of Rasulullah that they have carved literally with gold at the entrance of the Hagia Sophia Masjid to mark the true victory and as a fulfillment of the glad tidings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ni'mal amiru amiruha ni'mal. Latuftahunna, Rasulullah said, Latuftahunna Qustantiniya. Qustantiniya indeed shall be conquered. And whoever will conquer that Amir is the best of the Amirs, and the army is the best of the army. So you can see as you enter in, this hadith carved on the entrance of Sophia Masjid. So these are some reflections that I wanted to share today. Inshallah, we will look at how this city was conquered, and then when they were able, was it that Ottoman took over Palestine? Right? This is the next phase of it. And then what did they do in Palestine, and how did they deal with this community, the Jewish community, the Christian community? And then the next subsequent phase would be the changes that were made in the region to protect Masjid al-Aqsa from the infiltration of the certain communities. And of course, that led to the massive commotion in Europe against Ottomans, and they really used that as an opportunity to somehow weaken this state. It took, of course, a long period of time. This is interesting history. And eventually, it came to the fall of the Ottoman Empire. And with the fall of the Ottoman Empire, of course, that the subsequent period leads to the period of the Europeans taking over this part, British especially, and then creating Israel, the state, Jewish state. Right? So all of this is part of the inshallah, the history that we will look at briefly in the coming days, bismillah al-aziz. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept what we discussed, and may He enable us to benefit from these lessons. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon those great leaders that who really shined the history of Islam. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma bihamdik, wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursaleen, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.